Aloha, Andrew Aker here with Maui Freedom TV. Today is October 7th, 2023. We are on the island of Maui. I'm sitting with Barry O'Keefe. Tell us, sir, who are you? What are you all about?
Okay, I've lived on Maui for the past 4 years. I retired. I used to be a scientist with the Environmental Protection Agency for approximately 30 years. Before that, private industry and many years with the Department of Agriculture. We moved here in November of 2019, then COVID hit and everything after that. But what I'm here today, you've asked me to come to impart some information. And I'll start off by saying my background. Um, I am a scientist, as I said. I worked for about 30 years in the Office of Pesticide Programs. I was a risk assessor. I assessed human health risks. Human health risks due to pesticides, all different kinds of pesticides. I have written approximately 150 to maybe 200 human health risk assessments, everything from residential, occupational assessments, aggregate assessments, cancer assessments, and I've probably reviewed and edited well over 1,000 such documents from other scientists and doctors at the Environmental Protection Agency. Um, I was there for about, like I said, 30 years. Before that, I worked for a consulting company, what they call the Beltway Bandits in the DC, Washington, D.C. area. It was an environmental consulting company. While there, I was there for 7 years. For 5 of those years, I was the project manager for a database we set up for the National Library of Medicine. The database was the Hazardous Substances Data Bank. I had about 15 scientists working for me, and very proud of that data. That data, when we first set it up, had about 4,500 chemicals. I think it's closer to about 5,500 chemicals now, but essentially every chemical on the planet. And it looked at identifying the pest, the chemical, whatever chemical it was, what the effects on humans were, what the effects on the environment were, and then how to deal with it. So it originally was set up for your hazmat teams. This was back in the mid 80s we set it up, so that you would know what to do, how to treat it, how to clean it up, everything you needed to know about it was kind of a one-stop shopping. And we linked that up with the Hazardous Materials Technical Center, which we also had as a contract with the Defense Logistics Agency, which is all the military would use the same database. So we linked it so they could all use that data. So I did that from like the mid 80s up to like 1991, and then I went to EPA. So that's a brief history of my background. I've got a bachelor's in resource technology, and then I got a master's in soil chemistry. Never used that per se, because you go where you get paid and the type of work you do. And then I was more into human health risk assessments, looking at how to do that, how to assess the risk to humans.
And you said you'd also done some study into geology, is that correct?
Well, geology, my undergraduate degree in resource technology, if I took another 3 or 4 courses, 3 or 4 graduate level courses, I would be a geologist. It was a broad-based science background. A lot of chemistry, a lot of physics, mathematics, biology, chemistry. It was all the earth sciences, essentially.
Okay. So, having prefaced this video with all of your background
Okay.
information, thank you for sharing. I feel that there is something that is more urgent, something that is more urgent than what's happening with the Speaker of the House, what's happening with the Democrats versus the Republicans. There are much bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And
Yeah, I
would
mean,
you like to?
as I constantly learn as you go through life. And when Al Gore came out with this stuff about global warming and then they changed it to climate change, I never really bought any of it, because I knew from my geologic background and the history of geology, when you look back, you can see things in the rocks, in the sediments. And geologists can see things that have occurred, and they can see things that occur cyclically, and that, there's things that change over time. And then, so I kept searching for more information, and I came upon one of the books had there for you, the middle book. I was actually this was John L. Casey.
Cold
cold,
sun.
cold sun, where I just happened to be reading something on financial stuff, and somebody commented, said, "Oh, John Casey has good information on this, on solar cycles." And I started looking at solar cycles, and I looked at in his work and several other people on grand solar minimums. And every 200 years, every 400 years, we have an 11-year solar cycle, but then there's 100 years, 106-year solar cycle is like about a 200, and all these cycles can slightly vary. Anything in nature is variability. So a cycle doesn't have to be exactly, like even the 11-year solar cycle is not exactly 11 years. Sometimes it can be
Right.
it can be 10 years, sometimes it can be 12 years. It can vary somewhat.
So we can get into the details of that in the book. We'll send the link with this video. But the main point that we're talking about is the coronal mass ejections that we're overdue for.
Yeah, I learned
and some major events that are on the way.
I learned more as I kept digging and digging and found others. And then one of the greatest sites, actually the best site, which I found the same year. I've started this about 2013. I started really getting into this, and it was like just something that interests me. It wasn't my field of science, but I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I always dig for more information, and you get a thread, and you pull that thread, and you see what else you're going to find. So then I found Ben Davidson, and his site is, his main book is this book right here, Weatherman's Guide to the Sun, and which is actually used on many college campuses across the nation now when they're teaching people about weather and climate. His site is suspiciousobservers.org, and he actually daily, almost 365 days a year, he posts like a 3 to 5 minute little video on YouTube every day and gives you updates of what is occurring. What I learned from him is that there are 1,500-year cycles, also not just the 400-year grand solar minimum. The grand solar minimum is bad enough because back 400 years ago during the Maunder minimum in the 1600s, it was much colder when the people first came and started colonizing the United States. Well, you go 1,500 years, there's even worse things that happen. Then there's a 3,000-year cycle, which is the Dansgaard-Oeschger cycle. There's a 6,000-year cycle. It's the Heinrich cycle, also called the Noah cycle.
But what do these cycles mean for people on the ground?
Okay, I'm getting to that. But the largest one is the 12,000-year cycle, which basically, why it occurs is from the center of the Milky Way galaxy, there's an electromagnetic current sheet that ripples out, and it hits us every 12,000 years. It actually, it takes about almost 200 years for it to completely envelope our solar system. And it takes about that 200 years. We hit the leading edge of that in 1859. We had the Carrington event. If we had a Carrington event right now, we'd be back to the Stone Age. That's where the sun gives a certain amount of energy, just blasts us. At that time, the only electronics we had on the planet was the telegraph, and it was in its infancy. It had only been around for 2 or 3 years at that time, and it just fried it. And that was essentially something between an X40 to about an X50 coronal mass ejection from the sun. We get bigger ones. The Charlemagne event in the year 774 was about 10 times as large as that. The problem is we get those events, like the Carrington event happens every 150 to 200 years, and we're already about 164 years since that occurred, so we're overdue for that. Charlemagne events happen about once every 1,000 years, and we're overdue for that. That was about almost 1,300 years ago. But the big one is the 12,000-year event, which when that hits us, and it's hitting us right now, we're seeing the effects throughout our solar system. It's not just on our planet here. We will have something called a micronova, where essentially our sun it'll go down to a red sun, then a black sun, and then you won't see the sun. And then it will blast that shell off in the micronova, and then the sun gets re-energized. It's kind of like a snake shedding its skin, in a sense. This is just a normal process that happens, and it has happened down through time. But when that happens, it will greatly affect planet Earth. and I can go into all the details of that, or you can watch some of the movies I can give you that come from Ben's site. But we are on the doorstep of that right now. And as this electromagnetic current sheet is hitting and continuing to hit our solar system, it is destroying or diminishing the sun's heliosphere, and it's also diminishing and destroying Earth's magnetosphere. The heliosphere and the magnetosphere give us protection from galactic cosmic rays, which are always flowing all over and
so
hitting
let me jump
us.
in for a quick
It's
second.
It's like a protective shield.
The force field, like you said before in
it's
Star
like
Trek, right?
Star Trek would say, put up the force field.
So the Earth has its magnetosphere, but the sun has a bigger heliosphere, a sphere around the whole solar system, basically, right?
When they teach you, and they teach kids at school, they teach you and they show you the solar system, and they show all the planets going around. Well, it doesn't really work that way. The sun is actually plowing through the Milky Way galaxy. We're on one of the outer spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy. So the sun is moving. We're actually following behind the sun in like a cone behind the sun.
Right.
Yes, they are rotating, but it's not as they show you in your classroom.
Right.
I mean, they do things simplistic at school, but it doesn't really show what's really
There's
happening.
some amazing YouTube videos that show a 3D animation of the sun with the planet spiraling behind it.
They can do more now. I mean, they didn't have that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But
We're lucky these
as
days.
the sun's heliosphere gets weaker and weaker, it lets more galactic cosmic rays come in. The Earth's magnetosphere right now is a little below 70% of its full strength. In the year 1859, it was at 100% of its strength. From 1859 to the year 2000, it lost 10% of its strength. From 2000 to 2010, it lost another 5% of its strength. And then from 2010 to now, it's lost like another 17 or 18% of its strength. So it's losing its strength like this. We're going off of a cliff. It's a logarithmic, a geometric.
As the poles, north and south poles, are getting closer together, measurably, right?
This is not the axis spin poles, but the magnetic poles. The North Pole is now someplace over Siberia, and the South Pole is left Antarctica, and both of them are headed towards Indonesia. They're not going to meet up, but they'll get to a certain point, and then they flip, and then you'll have new poles.
Right. That's just like trying to hold magnets together on they push apart. Right.
But when we don't know when exactly things are going to happen to the day, you can't know that. It's a probability. All this is a probability. The solar micronova, from all the data that's available, will probably occur sometime between the late 2030s to the mid 2040s. My guess would be more towards like 2040 to 2042. That's only about less than 20 years from now, about 18 to 20 years from now at the worst. But well before that happens, we will get solar kill shots, which will put us back to the Stone Age, something between the Stone Age and the Bronze Age, where all electrical wires on the planet are going to get fried.
So don't be in your house when that happens.
Yeah, so there's going to be fires everywhere because so much energy is going to surge because as the magnetosphere gets weaker and weaker, it used to be we would take an X40 or an X50 coronal mass ejection solar flare from the sun to do that amount of damage. But now it may only take an X20, and it's not, when they measure them, it's like you can have an X20, which is a peak like this, and it's real quick, and it doesn't have much duration. The Carrington event was an X40 to X45, but it wasn't just like a peak for an hour. It lasted for a day and a half. So it's, when you're looking on an X and Y axis, you want to look at what is the duration of it, not just the intensity of it. And it's not like the Richter scale for earthquakes. A 7.4 that lasts for 10 seconds is not as bad as a 6.9 that lasts for like
10 minutes.
10 minutes, you know, long. So you have to look at the amount of energy that's being hit in the Earth. So as our magnetosphere probably is at like just below 70% right now, but it's falling off on a logarithmic scale. By about the end of this decade, by 2030, we'll be lucky if we have 50% of it left. And the sun is always giving off coronal mass ejections. We missed a really big one in July 9th of 2012. There was a really big one, but it shot off this way. and Earth was right here.
Mm.
It's like we're playing Russian roulette. And if the gun is pointed at us and shot, we might, and then is there a bullet in the chamber? And how strong is that bullet? Is it a big bullet? It's going to hit us. But then, as we go through this decade, a good analogy would be is we're playing Russian roulette with the sun, but somebody is putting more bullets into the chamber.
And lowering our shields at the same time.
Well, that's what it does, because so by the end of this decade or by the early next decade, it may only take an X-20 to an X-25 to do the trick. The powers that be know this is happening. They just don't want to tell everybody, because if you knew this was going to happen, you're not going to keep saving for your 401k. You're going to make other plans.
You're going to build underground bunkers like the billionaires are doing, maybe?
Yeah, but you don't need to be actually very far underground when it occurs. But there's basically going to be two events. It's the solar micronova, where I can get into all that if you want to.
Yeah, we'll get into that in the next one. We're already at 16 minutes here.
That has a lot of cataclysmic things that'll happen. But before that happens, we're going to have a solar kill shot. And I'll just say probability, we could have a solar kill shot next week, because you can get a big enough coronal mass ejection, even though we're at 70%, that could send us back to the Stone Age. You never know that.
And we're long overdue for multiple of these types of events.
Right. But I would just say we're probably going to have if you break it up into, say, 20 years, say 20 years from now, approximately 18 to 22 years, we're going to have the solar micronova. That, you can plan for it, and you kind of know that time frame is going to occur, but well before that, and say maybe 10 years before that, maybe by the early 2030s, we're going to have the kill shot. That will have a lot of people. If you don't want to live near downtown anywhere when that occurs, you want to be in a safe place. You don't want to be living in Canada in the middle of the winter when that occurs. You don't want to be living in South Florida in the middle of the summer when that occurs, because then you have to deal with it, and everybody around you has to deal with it, and nobody's prepared for it. It's one of the reasons I moved to Hawaii. But if you can prepare for it, that first kill shot, you can live fairly well up to the micronova. I mean, it will still be more difficult, because more galactic cosmic rays are going to continue to come in. It's going to be tougher to grow plants, because already we put sunscreen on, we get UVA and UVB, ultraviolet rays. Well, we have more and more UVC, which is coming in now, which is a more destructive ultraviolet. And it's not just burning your skin, it can burn plants. And
animals are getting confused with which way is north.
Well, that's the magnetism. That's slightly different. But
that messes how they interact with the plants, right? Messes with that.
But all the plants and the animals and all of us, it's going to affect us. And if you go to Ben's site, he does actually a couple of really good ones on how it is affecting us. And people are going to become more agitated and more screwed up mentally because of all this. So as he teaches people, we need to get mentally and physically strong to prepare for these things. I mean,
detox those heavy metals.
Yeah, and take care of your body, eat right, exercise right, but also have a firm understanding of what's coming, and be a tough person, be a self-reliant person. You need to know all these things ahead of time and be prepared. You can't say, well, why is this happening? I don't want this to happen in my life. Well, deal with it. The universe doesn't really care what any of us think. This is just a cycle.
Time
it
to
just
get a helmet.
happens.
So that brings me to our call to action. While we still have electricity, we're building a Telegram group where we're getting all of the links, all of the book references, everything that Barry and the other giants whose shoulders he's standing on with this information. And we're putting it together in an organized way that you, the viewers, the people of the world can interact with. You can add information to these sub-channels on Telegram. We will share the link with the video below. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and there's several videos which I've given you. Ben Davidson does a great job. He's got an hour and a half long video which explains it all in detail, but then he also has a 32-minute one and a 16-minute one. So you can watch the abbreviated ones if you're interested. You should be interested, because this is coming to a planet near you.
Yeah, this is a much bigger issue than the Republican Party, the Democrats, Donald Trump, or Gavin Newsom, or global politics, the economic system. This is
Yeah,
a big deal.
you can stick your head in the sand and say, I don't want this to happen. It's going to happen whether you're ready or whether you're not ready. But, as I was explaining to you earlier, there's a plus and a minus. There's a plus and minus to everything. There will be some good from this. We'll have a new world after this. How we want to plan, how we want to anticipate that and make that world, well, that's up to us.
Up to you. Aloha.